It's remake time, and today we're examining the beetle with the horn heard around the world, Heracross. First introduced in Generation 2, Heracross was tough to find in the Gold and Silver games, as players had to headbutt trees and hope they get lucky. In the anime, Ash had a Heracross which carried him through many difficult battles, including the climactic one against Gary. Heracross performed a stunning feat of anime logic in that fight by beating away Magmar's fire with its wings. Today we'll be examining if Heracross was similarly effective in the competitive scene, and so we asked, how great was Heracross actually? And in this video, we'll be going over these competitive formats. Despite its massive base 125 attack stat and brutally powerful stab megahorn, Heracross took on more of a supporting role in its debut generation, and it was quite excellent at it. It did hit many Pokemon incredibly hard, but the problem was that offensive teams packed Zapdos and defensive teams packed Skarmory, neither of which Heracross was going to get by, as the lack of true rock coverage or fighting stab respectively really hurt it. Now Heracross could potentially sweep if those Pokemon were dealt with, but that was not its primary value, more of an added bonus. Its primary value lay in its defensive profile, which let it stave off several threats which were otherwise massively difficult to manage, most notably Nidoking, as well as being immensely helpful against Machamp, Marowak, and even Gengar. It could even be used to stave off Cursed Steelix nicely, thus protecting a teammate like Skarmory from getting exploded on. And this was but one example of how Heracross assists its offensive team in dividing and conquering an opposing offensive team's attempts to concentrate their wall-breaking efforts on one particular target. They would often be unable to reach that target because Heracross would stand in their way. Another example was Heracross walling Gengar, which wanted to lure in and blow up on Raikou. If Gengar blew up Heracross, fine, but then Raikou would still be around to wall Gengar's teammate Zapdos, meaning Heracross accomplished this job. This trait was as rare as Heracross was efficient in executing it, and it was thus an integral member of many balanced teams' rock-solid defensive cores. Being forced to rest wasn't even a detriment for it, as it would pretty much always call a useful move from Sleep Talk. Heracross certainly wasn't just a wall though it struggled to actually rip through teams on its own by virtue of how common its walls were. This didn't mean it didn't slash through a significant portion of the tier, especially with its solid speed for the tier. Its Megahorn absolutely tore through common bug-weak Pokemon like Tyranitar, Exeggutor, and Umbreon. And neutral Pokemon weren't safe either. The likes of Snorlax and Raikou got hit really hard. Even several common resists like the Nidochimp Gar Heracross covered, or even something like Misdreavus didn't exactly work as resists either. After all, Heracross tended to check them, and Megahorn still chunked them quite decently. And even Gengar's quad resist and S-Toss immunity didn't help when it wasn't healing, unlike Heracross, and getting chipped by spikes. The extent of Heracross's offense wasn't just being a Megahorn machine either. Other sturdier Megahorn resists like Forretress and Steelix got worn down by Seismic Toss in conjunction with spikes too. As a result, the only really safe answers were Zapdos and Skarmory. Those of course were big things to be walled by. However, Heracross and its team would actually take advantage of how it was walled by them. The most classic examples was against stall teams, where Heracross would force in Skarmory and repeatedly Seismic Toss it, eventually forcing Skarm to rest. This was excellent in facilitating its teammate, the ferocious belly drum Snorlax. S-Toss Heracross was one of the Drumlax's favorite partners for this reason. But what about more offensive teams with Zapdos? Well, same deal. It took a little while thanks to Zapdos' larger HP stat, but eventually Heracross would force a rest, which gave Snorlax an easier time switching into and threatening out Zapdos so it could set up a belly drum, something it couldn't do in the face of thunders freely fired off while Zapdos was awake. Unlike against Skarmory, Heracross could also stay in on Zapdos if it felt like it, thanks to its great special defense. For perspective, Heracross easily lived a Mewtwo Psychic, so with Zapdos just about never running Drill Peck, Heracross was apt at baiting the third into wasting Thunder PP against it, providing another understated yet valuable trait Heracross brought to its team. This made its teammate Drumlax even more threatening by really forcing the issue of the timer Zapdos' Thunder PP were on. Drumlax wasn't the only Pokemon that could take advantage of S-Toss Hera either. Something like the dangerous Curse Rhydon was similarly appreciative. Now of course Heracross could act as a dangerous late game sweeper with Curse too. It wasn't an automatic replacement for S-Toss, as it did lose some defensive utility with it. For example, calling Curse in its sleep and slowing itself down could potentially impede its ability to check the likes of Marowak and Machamp, while also becoming totally walled by Steelix and making itself susceptible to Exeggutor. Additionally, as it was no longer luring in Zapdos and Skarm and weakening them with S-Toss, and was instead permanently walled, its team had to be built to account for that. However, Heracross was still an effective, valuable road roadblock to the likes of Nidoking and Gengar, and it came with the benefit of cleaning up hard with the right support, which wasn't difficult to find. Most commonly, Cursed Self-Destruct Snorlax was partnered with it, as it was the best lure in the game for destroying Skarmory and would thus clear a path for Heracross to wreak destruction against Stall, while Exeggutor was another common partner to bait in and ruin opposing offensive teams with Zapdos. Once Hera got going, it was seriously tough to stop. However, though Curse could be threatening, the Seismic Toss set was the variant that most showcased Heracross's place in GSC, as it allowed Heracross to most efficiently carry out the defensive-offensive roles that it was so unique and valuable in executing. It also theoretically could use reversal sets, but those were incredibly unreliable offensively and utterly worthless defensively, so they were relegated to gimmick territory, the complete opposite of its standard sets. And so Heracross was an understated but outstanding pillar of GSC balance teams. It was often overlooked until it appeared in battle and did its thing. And it was an excellent debut generation. Generation 2's dearth of options meant Heracross was held back from its enormous potential as a physical attacker. Then Generation 3 came around and did everything possible to correct that mistake. First, Heracross received actual fighting type stab, which was huge. Brick Break was solid and consistent, even bringing a screen shattering effect with it, as if Heracross wasn't enough of a threat to defense already. But it could also go big with the enormous power of Focus Punch. What about the flying types that threatened it though? Well, have no fear, because Heracross learned Rock Slide now and could smack them really good. It didn't end there though. No, far from it, as the already powerful Heracross could now strengthen itself to superlative levels with either the immediacy of Choice Band or the game-ending potential of Swords Dance. Heracross was effectively even stronger with Generation 3's shift to the EV system, which meant not everything had its bulk automatically maxed out anymore. Plus, with the addition of Select Berry, Heracross could even make itself faster than its would-be revenge killers. Select Berry, of course, worked when Heracross was at low HP, just like one of its excellent new abilities, Swarm, which made its Mega Horn an even more efficient kill button. Heracross wasn't relegated to an ability useful only at low HP either, but that would have been fine if it had been the case, but most of the time it ran Guts, which ensured that if the opponent dared status it, that all its attacks would become even stronger, thus making it even more insanely difficult to deal with. Now, the one downside Heracross experienced in Generation 3 was the complete loss of defensive utility. The most it could say was that it was a physical attacker that didn't fear water types. However, for something this destructive, who cares? Heracross was instantly one of Advance's most ferocious attacker. It was nigh uncounterable. It was a Pokemon that you had to play around rather than answer safely, and if the Heracross user played well, was pretty much impossible to do so without at least sustaining serious damage, if not one KO minimum. Sure, some checks like Salamence and Gengar were better than others, but they weren't exactly foolproof, not just because of Heracross's coverage moves, which were excellent, but because of its raw, immediate power with Choice Band, which was just ridiculous at times. It meant it didn't need to predict switch-ins and use coverage moves because Mega Horn was just so appallingly powerful, ripping through even Ments and Zapdos that thought they could withstand it, while ensuring neutral targets like Swampert and Suicune got absolutely shattered. Skarmory wasn't even a good check anymore, as it was potentially one-hit KO'd by Choice Band Focus Punch. It's not like Heracross needed Choice Band Focus Punch to invalidate Skarm as a check though. There were several ways it could do that, but the most straightforward way was to partner with Magneton, as it often did, to make Skarmory a complete non-factor. Even being prone to Dugtrio didn't stop Heracross. Not only did this not necessarily work against variants with Sub and or Select Berry, but a well-built Heracross team would have many ways of punishing a Dug Trap. For example, giving a partner Tyranitar or Salamence a free Dragon Dance. On certain teams, Heracross even partnered with Dugtrio itself for one of the most unique strategies in Advance. When the opposing Dugtrio locked into Aerial Ace to remove Heracross, that allowed Heracross's partner Dugtrio to come in and remove the opposing Dugtrio. This was absolutely incredible for enabling Heracross's Dugtrio weak teammates like Metagross and Tyranitar. Heracross wasn't the fastest thing in the world, but its speed tier was still solid. In fact, its speed stat was one of the most important numbers in the tier, even being metagame defining, since many potential faster Pokemon like Salamence, Zapdos, and Moltres specifically EV themselves to outrun it. They would have absolutely loved to have gone slower, since there wasn't much else in that Heracross speed tier, but they couldn't or Heracross would crush them. With this solid speed and its great natural bulk, in addition to useful typing for a physical attacker, boasting a resistance to Earthquake and a neutrality to water and ice, Heracross would always find some opportunity to wreak havoc on a game-to-game basis. It was effective at forcing huge damage on the opponent, not just in advantageous matchups, but even in seemingly disadvantageous ones, notably being able to take Psychics from the likes of offensive Jirachi and Celebi. And that was just against fast-paced teams. Against slow defensive teams, well, there was nothing they hated facing more than Heracross. Heracross. It absolutely destroyed them. It had all the opportunity in the world against Blissey, Claydol, slow Celebies, bulky Suicunes. They were just torn apart by it. Heracross was the single biggest argument against running an all-out stall team. You thought you had everything walled, then Heracross showed up and single-handedly ruined you. Even obscure, supposedly dedicated counters like Weezing, Dusclops, and bulky Salamence could stop it once, but in the long run, Heracross would bowl them over. They were too slow and weak to stand up to it once it had gotten some easily accumulated chip damage on them, and then chose to boost up and go for game. Heracross would have been a solid Pokemon even if it was forced to go itemless and use no move other than Mega Horn, but its set versatility made it even better, making it even more difficult to handle. And of course, no matter which set it chose, it was always going to be threatening by virtue of how badly Mega Horn ripped the tier up. We've already mentioned the almost peerless instant brutality of the Choice Band set. The Substitute Swarm Select Swords Dance set was one of the tier's most dangerous cleaners, sure. Dropping to low HP was risky on a sand-affected Pokemon in the Tyranitar tier, but that could be assuaged through weather-changing teammates, and the rewards were worthwhile. As one setup, Heracross's cleaning prowess was nigh unmatched, outrunning and one-hit KOing nearly everything. There was something to be said for the insanity that was one-hit KOing Metagross with a neutral physical attack, even if boosted. Heracross could also Swords Dance without the sub, and without the select, it became even more threatening when it could fit Fighting Stab onto its set, meaning it didn't require Scarm removing support as it could just do so itself. While Heracross also loved the longevity of leftovers, meaning teams couldn't just try to outlast it in Sandstorm, especially in conjunction with Protect. When Skarmory started shifting away from running Drill Peck in favor of Protect and Toxic, Swords Dance Focus Punch Heracross appeared and punched it like nothing else. Heracross didn't even have to boost at all. It could simply use an all-out attacking set, maximizing its coverage with Hidden Power Ghost for Gengar. It could dip into other items too. Lum or Chestleberry allowed it to counteract sleep moves, with the latter being useful for allowing it to stop sleep while still making use of Guts if being hit by other status. Alternatively, it could run Sleep Talk. It was a great Breloom stop. Heracross could even function as a lead, instantly scaring the popular Tyranitar lead who thought it safely set up Sand at the beginning of the game. Indeed, many teams relied on dealing with Heracross through setting up passive damage before it got a chance to come in, meaning it'd be on a timer as soon as it hit the field. But lead Heracross threw a serious wrench in this. The best part was that Heracross could mix and match as it pleased, and even toy with other options to great effect. Sub Focus Punch? Sure. Toxic Heracross to utterly ruin Salamence and Gyarados? Why not? It can afford the moveset. Thief Heracross to steal leftovers? Absolutely. Endure Reversal Heracross? It needed a lot of support, but under the right conditions, boy could that thing sweep. Quick Claw Heracross. Once again, it sure could afford it. Tossing Select Berry on a non-sub Heracross to take advantage of how often it dropped to low HP? Sure. In a similar vein, using Swarm over Guts on the Choice Band set for a Mega Horn that could one-hit KO Salamence? Yeah. Heracross was one of the single most dangerous Pokemon in Advanced OU and was massively defining and influential. Fun fact, in Japan, Heracross was considered so dangerous as to be ban-worthy from OU. So all in all, it was an insanely successful generation for Heracross, as long as Mega Horn hit, of course. It was a bit high risk, but it more than made up for it. Its potential reward wasn't just high, it was stratospheric. Heracross also had a solid niche in Gen 3 Ubers. Its Choice Band Mega Horns were nearly impossible for many teams to switch into. Every Uber not named Ho-Oh or Rayquaza was neutral or weak to it, making it incredibly easy to spam and cleave huge chunks of damage on whatever switched in. Plus, Ho-Oh and Rayquaza were deathly afraid of Banded Rock Slide. With how easily Groudon and Kyogre spread Thunder Wave, it was easy to slow down opposing teams and run them over with repeated Mega Horns. Alternatively, Heracross could go for a late game sweep with a sub Select set, fully taking advantage of the fact that Sun and Rain were the tier's dominant weather. And so Heracross was one of the best sleeper picks in Gen 3 Ubers, capable of threatening pretty much every team. Generation 4 gifted Heracross a fighting stab of equal power to its mighty Mega Horn in the form of close combat, making it even more insanely dangerous, and that wasn't all. Did Heracross want to instantly fix its speed? Choice Scarf it was. Did Heracross want to instantly boost its attack without the move lock effort of Choice Band? It could go with Life Orb, Flame Orb, or Toxic Orb. Even Heracross's coverage options were stronger. It threatened to destroy flying types not with Rock Slide, but with the much more powerful Stone Edge, while Night Slash was an improvement improvement for ripping through ghost types. Heracross could even take on trapping duties with the now physical pursuit. And with all of these boosts, Heracross instantly became one of the most popular, dangerous, defining Pokemon in early Diamond and Pearl, utilizing a number of different sets, much like it did in Advance to rip through the metagame. Except now, it was even more instantly threatening because one couldn't necessarily beat it by outrunning it, as Choice Scarf would make quick work of Pokemon like Infernape. Weezing of all things was quite popular in large part because it didn't crumple against Heracross. Sadly, the huge popularity and success Heracross enjoyed in Diamond and Pearl didn't quite last. It started when Gliscor started eclipsing Weezing, as thanks to Roost's reliable recovery, it was far more resilient against prolonged Heracross assaults, as well as being able to outspeed non-Scarf Heracross variants that could potentially boost up and blow it away. That was just the beginning though. The discovery of Swords Dance Extreme Speed Lucario as a serious competitor for Heracross certainly didn't help matters. However, these were minor all things considered. Sure, Hera wasn't as outright dominant as it had been, but it was still a highly prominent Pokemon. The real blow came with the release of Platinum. The Rotom appliance brought another effective Heracross check to the table, but Rotom A, Swords Dance Lucario, and Gliscor were nothing compared to Scizor. If Heracross had just had to contend with the uptick in usage of the other three, it would have barely slowed down. They were inconveniences more than anything else. However, Platinum gifting Scizor Bullet Punch, which in conjunction with U-Turn made for the perfect choice bander that rocketed the red metal bug to #1 in usage, was a death knell so precise it almost seemed engineered to displace Heracross from the metagame completely. It wasn't that Heracross was bad, far from it. It was just that it was never going to be able to compete with the immense utility Scizor brought to a team, with its coveted dragon-resistant steel typing, powerful momentum-maintaining U-turn, and ultimate revenge-killing priority attack. As such, Heracross went from being a top-tier staple to all but disappearing. Well, from serious play anyway. It was still used enough in OU that it remained in the tier, but it was never used in tournament play, and slowly but surely, its OU usage began to slip. Finally, well into Heart Gold and Soul Silver, the long-awaited, previously unthinkable finally happened. Heracross dropped to UU. To say Heracross destroyed UU would be an understatement. Some players naively predicted it wouldn't be so bad. After all, Weezing was already a top-tier Pokemon for its ability to stave off other big threats like Venusaur. Heracross then promptly obliterated Weezing with a +2 Guts boosted Facade, and then all bets were off. This Pokemon was officially uncounterable. With its useful speed and great natural bulk, it wasn't exactly left wanting for switch-in opportunities either, and it smacked nearly the entire tier for either super effective or neutral damage. And with a Pokemon as strong as Heracross, neutral damage was all it needed to grab KOs against tier staples like Milotic. Every set was absolutely ferocious. Scarf, Choice Band, Status Orb, sub-variants, they all shredded the tier with minimal effort. Certain players even began running an excellent Life Orb set with both Stabs and Rest Talk, which packed longevity in addition to power. And so eventually Heracross was predictably banned from UU. So did Heracross just languish in BL? Well, not quite. It eventually found a resurgence in OU. Not quite enough to become a true OU Pokemon again, but its niche was legitimate, and it saw tournament success for the first time since Diamond and Pearl. First, Scizor's usage had dropped off a cliff for a number of reasons. Second, the role Heracross rose to fill was not something Scizor could replicate. In its desperation to handle the externally exasperating Breloom, the player base turned to Heracross, whose Choice Band Guts Sleep Talk set turned Spore into an opportunity to fire off its devastating attacks, which cleave through even resists. Even Gliscor couldn't switch into it safely because of the insane damage Band Guts Facade did. It was a small niche, but a unique, valuable one that brought Heracross back to a legitimate place in DPP OU. Also, despite enormous power creep, Heracross once again had a niche in Ubers. It was smaller this time around, but its Scarf set was legit. It was hyper-specific, but it was one of the few Pokemon able to switch in safely against Darkrai. It resisted both Dark Pulse and Focus Blast, as being slept by Dark Void would activate Guts, and Darkrai was eviscerated by both Mega Horn and Close Combat, which were threatening to much of the Ubers tier. Even Giratina Origin didn't particularly enjoy switching into Guts Mega Horn with Stealth Rock up. Heracross wasn't exactly the kind of thing you slapped on every team, but it certainly had its place, and it could be a fierce late game cleaner since Mega Horn tore through Mewtwo and the laddies with ruthless efficiency. So overall, Heracross had a successful, adventurous Generation 4. With the immense power creep of Generation 5, Heracross was never gonna make it in OU. Scizor continued to dominate, Gliscor had gained Poison Heal, and there were several obnoxious new additions like Jellicent that would make life difficult for it. This sent Heracross down to UU, and there it became a star. It pretty much operated in two modes. Either it would be tasked with tearing through offensive teams with Choice Scarf, or it would act as a defensive team's worst nightmare with Swords Dance, using leftovers for that all-important longevity. In both roles, it was outstanding, especially because it had never been easier to circumvent its limited defensive profile. It could hit the field easily thanks to the many U-turn and Volt switching using Pokemon it could partner up with, allowing it to bludgeon the opposition repeatedly. And it had plenty of checks like Zapdos and Eevee like Gligar, but as always, Heracross could destroy them with good play. It only got more dangerous over time too, as in Black and White 1, it received its Dream World ability Moxie, which elevated its Scarf set to new heights. It wasn't just more effective at cleaning now, it was so capable of creating an instant snowball effect where it take over and finish a game with such minimal effort that offensive teams now had to go out of their way to not get swept by it. And even that might not be enough. Suddenly, not even being unnaturally bulky resist was enough to stave Heracross off. Even something like offensive Zapdos also had to stay healthy enough to not drop to a +1 close combat. This was perhaps the most significant contributing factor to Nidoqueen's increase in UU usage that eventually lifted it out of RU. It was one of the very few Pokemon that could withstand Heracross's hits without going full defensive. Plus, even if it wasn't exactly foolproof, sure, it withstood Heracross's stabs decently, but one Earthquake on the switch and it was in trouble. Heracross loved making Earthquake predictions in general, since it also slammed other switch-ins to its stabs like Chandelure and Quillfish. What made Heracross even more effective was that it was part of the fighting boom that defined much of UU's offense. When paired with other dangerous fighters, usually Mienshao, but also very feasibly Virizion, Cobalion, or Scrafty, it was difficult for the opponent to withstand the combined fighting type assault, and as such, Scarf Heracross often wound up sweeping even teams that were well prepared for it on paper. Of course, Swords Dance Heracross continued to excel, particularly at the peaks of Hail's dominance. With leftovers, it was one of the few Pokemon capable of threatening those teams. It was always just common enough to prevent Stall from ever getting comfortable. It wasn't just a stall killer either. Since it also ran Guts, it thus completely turned the tables on would-be answers like Cofagrigus and Sableye, and was just a fiercely effective attacker in general. The fact that such a brutally dangerous Pokemon was often overlooked was just testament to how obscenely terrifying, defining, and prominent the Scarf set was. It's not often that Scarf Pokemon are also among the most threatening Pokemon in a tier, but that's exactly what Heracross was. So chalk up another success for the Beetle in Generation 5. If you've got insectophobia, no worries. VGC is one of the hardest places for bug types to thrive. Spread, rock, and fire moves have made it so only the most exceptional insects are able to find a place in VGC greatness. Scizor, Volcarona, Araquanid, Escavalier, Durant, Shedinja, most of these bugs have some sort of unique trait to set them apart, be it Wonder Guard, or Water Bubble, or Technician Bullet Punch. It's a rough ecosystem for the bug type. So what sets Heracross apart? Well, how about 125 base attack, one of the best abilities in the game, and access to stab Megahorn? Yeah, that's pretty good. Heracross has plenty of things going against it in VGC. It's not particularly fast, its defenses aren't that great, and its typing leaves it vulnerable to plenty of Pokemon. But what it does offer is some of the best in class single target bug damage in the game. And over time, various trainers have been tempted by that massive power. Now, bug isn't a particularly sought after offensive type, except for a few situations, one of which might be to remove psychic types. Like Mavie, the Cresselia that dominated VGC 2012. One of the first players to show Heracross's potential was Randy R. Inanimate Qua. R. Inanimate developed a Heracross team for the International Wi-Fi Challenge in April 2012. R. Inanimate's Heracross was a one-man Cresselia removal force, outfitted with a bug gem and some investment in its already okay special defense to handle one of the format's most dominant mons. R. Inanimate also gave his Heracross close combat and feint for some priority. But unfortunately, his special defense somewhat went to waste against many Cresselias, which opted for Psyshock and bypassed his bulk. He also showcased what would become a common option on Heracross teams, Tailwind, in this case on his Togekiss. Nevertheless, R. Inanimate inspired Marco, Niscore, Sandoval to give Heracross a shot at Pleasanton Regionals, and Niscore put the team to great use, winning the Regionals and evaporating some Cresselias in the process. But when it comes to Heracross players in 2012, there's another name we'd remiss not to mention, longtime Nugget Bridge member Cassie. At 2012 US Nationals, Cassie played a team that looked quite a bit like like the popular Hail Room teams going around at the time. And for Heracross, Trick Room seemed like a smart choice. Give it a Bug Gem or a Flame Orb, twist the dimensions, and let the bug go wild. But Cassie's team was a bluff. Sure, her team had a Trick Room mode with Chandelure and Abomasnow, but Heracross wasn't benefiting from it. In fact, her Heracross wasn't Bug Gem at all, or even Flame Orb, and it didn't need Tailwind support. It was Choice Scarf, a nasty surprise that let it outrun key opponents like Latios and Zapdos. Cassie recognized that even without a boost, Heracross's Mega Horns were so strong that it could one-hit KO specially defensive Cresselia off rip, not to say anything of the Latios. With Stone Edge, it could also remove opposing Zapdos, and close combat was a useful second stab to hit Tyranitar and Hydreigon, as well as opposing fire types. Cassie rounded out the set with a ubiquitous Rock Slide. And here's the thing, even though Heracross wasn't carrying a Flame Orb, that didn't mean it couldn't benefit from getting a little singed. Cassie could self-wisp her Heracross with her Prankster Sableye, giving it an immediate boost while keeping its fearsome Scarf speed tier. This strategy took her all the way to the top cut of the US Nationals, where she fell to eventual tournament winner Wolf Glick, and made her name as a Heracross expert. 2013, with its focus on Landorus T and other genies, was a difficult format for Heracross. It also faced stiff competition from Conkeldurr, who brought more bulk and priority along with the same ability and even better power. That said, a few Beetles still managed to find their way into tournament top cuts. At the Salem Regionals, Randy Quahl was in for a familiar sight when he went up against his own Heracross team, piloted by Max Douglas. Randy defeated the team, but Max still finished in the top 8 of the tournament. Over in Europe, Christopher Corio Arthur ran a double bug team with Sizzler and Heracross. Corio also found Heracross's natural climate. The rain side of his team kept his bugs from getting crisped up too much and managed to net him top 16 placements at both the Italian and UK Nationals. But 2013's undisputed king of Heracross was Steven Morioka, who managed to take Heracross to even greater heights than it had ever seen before. Steven gave Heracross a whole trophy case, finishing second at 2 separate regionals. Steven's first Heracross use at the 2012 Fall Regionals was very similar to Randy Quahl's version. Bug Gem Guts with Mega Horn, close combat, protect, and feint in lieu of a coverage move, backed up by a whole bevy of speed control. Steven used all of Tailwind, Icy Wind, Thunder Wave, and Trick Room at some point to facilitate his Heracross. With speed control coming from other places, Steven was also able to give his Heracross decent special bulk, enough to lift unboosted heat waves from common enemies. Steven's eventual Nationals and Worlds teams had a supporting cast of Tyranitar, Thunderous Eye, Heatran, Cresselia, and Breloom. He emphasized the defensive synergy between Heracross, T-Tar, and Heatran, who appreciated some of Bug Typing's only saving graces, its resistances to ground and fighting type moves. In addition to the obviously good Cresselia matchup, Heracross also could 1v1 Pokemon like T-Tar, Heatran, Ludicolo, and even Hitmontop, who it could wear. What really kicked Steven's team into overdrive though was the release of Heracross's Dream World ability, Moxie. Very few things could survive a Bug Gem boosted Megahorn. Once Heracross launched that off, Steven was off to the races, often able to chain KOs and give Heracross an attack boost that put Guts to shame. Feint's priority could also help here by picking off Sashmons and their last legs. This Heracross team managed to get top 8 at the US Nationals and top 16 at Worlds that year. And after Worlds, at Fall 2013 Regionals, Steven's dedication to Heracross finally paid off when he won a gold medal to hang around Heracross's horn. And special thanks to Steven Morioka for the information. Generation 6 gifted Heracross a Mega Evolution. On the downside, Mega Heracross lost speed upon Mega Evolving. On the upside, it was still more than fast enough to do what Hera always did best, bust up slowly bulky Pokemon. On another upside, it also gained a ton of bulk, which was immensely valuable in allowing it to tank hits from faster threats it wouldn't have outsped anyway, which actually increased the number of Pokemon it could go toe-to-toe with. On another upside still, it gained an absolutely obscene base attack boost, which made the term overkill seem like an understatement. There was absolutely nothing it couldn't rip to shreds about 1,000,000 times over. As if that wasn't enough, its new ability was effectively a power boost as well. Sure, losing Guts was unfortunate, but Skill Link guaranteeing 5-hit Pin Missiles and Rock Blast meant that Mega Hera was hitting harder than it would with Mega Horn and Stone Edge, and with more accuracy to boot. Of course, Mega Hera was far from the only Pokemon around that was nigh unwallable, but unlike its main competition, Mega Medicham, it could Earthquake Aegislash into dust, giving it a significant advantage in the XY metagame. And there was another fierce Mega that Heracross competed with, the similarly obscenely strong Mawile, whose defensive typing was excellent. However, M-Hera's superior speed was invaluable in letting it blast through Pokemon like Rotom Wash and Mega Venusaur that would otherwise stop Mawile in its tracks. Its lack of an Earthquake weakness meant it didn't fear Landorus T or Gliscor at all either, which was huge. Additionally, its close combat was enormous in ripping through the Heatran that was similarly irritating for Mawile. Finally, Mega Heracross was pretty much as automatic a one Pokemon Pokemon stall killing machine as one could get, and thus saw plenty of usage during the style's burst in usage. Though not the most intuitive pick, Rain teams loved using Mega Heracross. Rain excelled at ripping through offense, but were destroyed by stall, and this allowed them to balance out their matchups. Once Aegislash was banned, Mega Heracross got even better, as it no longer had to include Earthquake into its moveset, and once Mega Mawile got banned, it had even less competition. Yes, there was still Mega Medicham, but Mew also became incredibly popular to stonewall it, and Mega Heracross effortlessly ripped through Mew with Pin Missile. Then Oraz came around, and in the wake of Mega Metagross, Diancie, and Altaria, Heracross was forgotten for a while, but once New Toy Syndrome wore off, Heracross returned with a vengeance. With the help of Volt Turn support from tier staples like Rotom Wash, Landorus Therian, Tornadus Therian, and Jirachi, Mega Heracross would find its way on the field, and once it did, it was pretty much impossible to stop it from claiming a KO, especially as it enjoyed running Substitute to ease prediction against switch-ins that tried to play off resistances. The protection against burns from Alomomola Scald certainly didn't hurt either. Clefable had become one of the most popular Pokemon around, and it resisted both stabs, but it certainly wasn't taking on Heracross's insanely powerful Rock Blast. It was an immensely reliable wall breaker against pretty much anything it would face. Now, Heracross wasn't the most splashable Mega around, but it always had its place. Whenever Stall or Spike's balance teams got too comfortable, Hera would show up and wreck them. Plus, even against offense, Mega Heracross's fantastic bulk and useful typing ensured it would be able to, at worst, keep something like Superior in check and trade 1-for-1. That's a lot better than most dedicated wall breakers. And so, Mega Heracross was an understated but always effective piece of ORAS OU. Regular Heracross returned to UU, and there it was excellent once again. It massively enjoyed the buff knockoff, which ensured the Scarf set could irritate even would-be hard walls. However, it was its Choice Band and Swords Dance sets that came to be Hera's calling card this time around. Right off the bat, X and Y UU was populated by plenty of balance and stall teams, and Hera showed in shredding them to ribbons. Then, by virtue of Mega Hera's success in OU, Heracross moved up in usage and left UU for a while. But then ORAS came around, and base Heracross returned to rip UU's bulky cores once again. It was always there, reliable at ensuring defensive teams never got too out of hand, and thereby cementing a solid place for itself in the tier. However, it was during Conkeldur's reign of terror that Heracross really began to shine, using the leftover Swords Dance set for several notable advantages. Whereas bulk of Conkeldurr was immensely broken, it did have times where it struggled to really get going against the opponent's Florges, Crobat, or Cresselia. Heracross, being completely unwallable, did not have this problem, and effortlessly shredded the balance course that tripped over themselves to not lose the conk. It blasted through Florges with +2 Megahorn, and could tear through Crobat with a Stone Edge on the switch. Plus, unlike Conk, who had to use Choice Band and have good prediction to do so, Heracross did this while maintaining the excellent longevity of leftovers. Furthermore, Heracross could itself act as an offensive check to Conk. Eventually, Conkeldurr was banned, but Heracross maintained its niche as a valuable balance breaker in ORAS UU. So overall, the 6th generation was another excellent one for Heracross, base and Mega alike. Gen 6 VGC wasn't a good look for Heracross. Talonflame is basically built to exterminate this thing, and on top of that you have Megazard, Zapdos, and Volcarona everywhere. All terrible matchups. Bug Gem was also gone, reducing its ability to pump out immediate damage and potentially grab a Moxie boost. The cherry on top? Fairy types, who resisted both its stabs and could easily hit back super effectively. The one saving grace was Heracross's own good matchup against Mega Kangaskhan and Tyranitar. What's more, 2014 wasn't a format lacking for strong physical attackers, meaning that the format was full of Intimidates that could diminish Heracross's one attractive quality. Its biggest enemy was Mawile, a fairy type who could exploit Heracross's low physical defenses and intimidate it before evolving. However, with the advent of Mega Evolution, Heracross was capable of doing big damage even through attack drops, and it's hard not to be just a little bit tempted by that juicy 185 attack stat, right? And skill link, Pin Missile is 5 more base power and 10% more accurate than Megahorn, and you get Rock Blast too. And yet, despite more valiant efforts, players really struggled to make Mega Heracross work. It simply wasn't worth using a Mega Slot for, and the 10 base speed drop really hurt. What's more, one of Heracross's best qualities is as a Will-O-Wisp Absorber, a trait it completely loses if it chooses to switch over to Skill Link. You can see this reflected in 2014 results, where Mega Heracross only had a single notable placement, courtesy of Pietro Chiri, who placed 24th with it at the Italian Nationals. In order to access Mega Heracross's massive power, Pietro paired it with Tailwind Talonflame. But the more successful Heracross placements were all regular Heracross. Len Alaka Duel and Tyler Hagan ran a team with good old Scarf Heracross that resulted in an 18th in Long Beach and a 12th in Missouri, but Heracross never cut top 8 at an event, daunted by the unfavorable meta. And special thanks to Len Alaka Duel for the information. Pietro wasn't done with Heracross yet though. He brought the Beetle back in Mega Form to Nationals in 2015, this time placing 18th in Germany, and over in the UK, Ethan Hall managed a 20th place. However, these were Heracross's only placements of the year and its last appearance at all in Gen 6, and it had no place in the 2016's restricted meta. With Generation 7's infestation of fairy types and general sense of new toy syndrome, Mega Heracross's initial lower usage was predictable. But then again, so was its swift ban once it hit UU. The very concept of having Mega Heracross in UU was mind-boggling. It was briefly reconsidered for another trial, but then the player base resoundingly agreed that that would be ridiculous. Amusing though this was, it did potentially leave Mega Hera out to dry if it couldn't find an OU niche. Fortunately, that wasn't the case, as its many talents were eventually put to good use. The meta eventually shifted towards bulky teams with seemingly unbreakable cores, until Mega Hera showed up, that is, and dismantled them effortlessly. There was nothing it couldn't destroy, and it punished such teams ruthlessly, even more so than Mega Mawile, since it didn't fear Gliscor and Magnezone at all. It wasn't even potentially traded with by Tangrowth like Mawile was. Mega Heracross was even more dangerous with two of the terrains running around OU. It was most commonly seen alongside Tapu Fini, whose Misty terrain shielded Mega Heracross from crippling status, thereby allowing it to tear through Toxapex and friends with maximum efficiency. However, Mega Heracross also occasionally enjoyed partnering with Tapu Bulu and slotted Bullet Seed into his moveset, which became incredibly powerful under grassy terrain and made Heracross even more unwallable. Plus, the passive recovery was invaluable in maintaining Heracross's health, preventing it from getting worn down by passive damage from spikes and the like, and of course, preserving Mega Heracross's great natural bulk to be put to use against offense as well. It was a great answer to Tapu Bulu itself, and it had plenty of other valuable resists, most notably Dark, because you could never be too safe against Ash Greninja while also checking boosted Mega Mawile. Additionally, it could stretch that grass resist to help against Choice Kartana. So overall, Mega Heracross had a solid place in Generation 7 OU and saw plenty of tournament success. Meanwhile, regular Heracross dropped to RU again, a mind-boggling concept. Sure, there's power creep, but how did it not just destroy the whole tier? Oh wait, that's exactly what it did. With its Choice Scarf and Flame Orb sets alike, the former was as strong as always, but the latter was downright vicious, not only because it ripped everything to shreds, though it did do that, but also because Generation 7 had nerfed burn damage to a paltry 6.25%. Switching around and stalling it out was far less reliable than in the previous generation. As such, it quickly became a contentious Pokemon within the tier and wound up banned, just like its Mega form had been in UU. Sadly, for the first time ever, base Heracross was unable to succeed in UU, at least compared to the previous generations. It wasn't that it was bad, far from it. No, it was more that Scizor was now UU, and in a cruel repeat of the Platinum metagame so many years prior, it was just too much for Heracross to consistently keep up with. Scizor's all-around excellence made it one of the best Pokemon in the tier, and though Heracross certainly had its own advantages, it was far more specific relative to its competition. As such, it didn't see much usage. However, all in all, Generation 7 was another successful one for both base and Mega Heracross. After all, before base Heracross found itself stifled in UU, it had blasted RU apart. Tapus, Incineroar, Megaments, Landorus T. Gen 7 was not a fun type for Heracross, and very few players even attempted to make it work. The only player to achieve any success with Heracross was James Ferrugia, who, as you can see from his Twitter profile picture and YouTube channel name, is uniquely poised to chase Beetle greatness. James went all in on making Mega Heracross work. One of his small adjustments was to use a Heracross with Moxie over Guts, and because James was always going to be Mega Evolving Heracross, Guts wouldn't do anything for him, whereas rare occasions where Heracross could snag a KO before evolving could mean a boost to its attack, as if it needed one. Every single move in Heracross's set was 120 base damage or higher, from Pin Missile to Close Combat to Bullet Seed to Rock Blast. The stab moves are self-evident, but they were quite well positioned to take on multiple Pokemon in the meta, like Snorlax, Gothitelle, Kartana, and T-Tar being the most prevalent. Rock-type moves should be self-explanatory by this point, and Bullet Seed was helpful against bulky waters like Fini and Gastrodon. All in all, pretty good coverage, but with poor defenses and lower word speed, how does this bug even hit anything? Well, James had two answers to that: Tailwind and Trick Room. Mega Heracross's base 75 speed actually positioned it very well to operate under both forms of speed control, which James set with Porygon 2 and Pelipper. Pelipper's Rain also helped keep Heracross safe against fire moves, and at that point all Heracross had to do was get a hit off. Charizard on the other side of the field troubling you? Not after a Rock Blast. Snorlax in your face? No chance it was living a close combat. James was able to get 5th place at the Melbourne Open with this team, giving Mega Heracross its best placement ever and 1 day in the sun for Gen 7, even if it honestly preferred the rain. And special thanks to James Ferrugia for the information. Sadly, Sword and Shield took away Heracross's Mega and even Heracross itself for a time. It didn't return until the Isle of Armor, where it settled into UU. It was immensely difficult for many teams relying on the standard Zarude, Slowbro, Cobalion core because it handles Zarude and Cobalion well and was a fighting type that tore through Slowbro, as well as its backup fighting resist, Noivern. It did have plenty of fighting type competition in Terrakion, Keldeo, Obstagoon, and the aforementioned Cobalion. Most notably, their higher speed made them much better against opposing offensive teams, whereas Heracross was more geared towards dissecting bulky cores. Still, it had enough distinct valuable advantages to have a legitimate place in UU, such as Spikes, which it now received, as if it didn't have enough ways to spread damage onto the opposing team. However, for all its good points, Heracross didn't have enough to be a true UU Pokemon, and it fell to RU, where it was instantly banned for tearing the tier to absolute shreds. For comparison, the meta had struggled to contain the likes of fighters like Beware and Passimian, so when Heracross showed up, it just destroyed everything. Then the Crown Tundra came around, and the power creep of the increased Pokedex meant Heracross was no longer blatantly overpowered, so it returned to RU where it remains today. It thrives as a balance breaker, as it shreds all of Registeel, Reuniclus, and Umbreon, which is immensely valuable to have all in one slot, while common checks like Crobat and Togekiss are ruined when their heavy-duty boots are knocked off. Heracross itself runs boots a decent amount, allowing it to stick around to repeatedly hammer away at the opponent, thereby winning its own aggressive version of the War of Attrition. It has plenty of variety in how it can mess with the opponent too. Since it no longer runs the Flame Orb set's Facade, it can choose to lay Spike's boost with Swords Dance or increase its coverage against Crobat and Togekiss with Stone Edge. It isn't just good at beating up defensive Pokemon either. Its useful speed tier places it above common mid-range offensive threats like Xurkitree and Metagross, and it is quite a solid overall Pokemon in RU. As for UU, Heracross maintains a niche in that tier too. Though Conkeldurr remains a massive threat, Heracross once again differentiates itself with a few key adjustments. First, its speed. Outrunning Aegislash and Primarina is excellent. Second, Heracross threatens to instantly destroy Slowking and Tangrowth. Third, Heracross is able to check 2 of the tier's best Pokemon in Zygarde 10% and Zarude. Fourth is, of course, Spikes. Now, there's a reason why Conkeldurr is used so much, and why Heracross is relegated to more niche territory. Heracross's ability to completely shred bulky teams isn't too needed, whereas Conkeldurr's ability to shrug off chip damage with powerful drain punches and rip apart Pokemon like Excadrill, Hydreigon, and Scarf Diggersby proves itself to be more consistently valuable. Still, Heracross maintains a niche and sees sporadic usage as a result. And so overall, though it's definitely been on a stranger trajectory than usual, the 8th generation has been another successful one for Heracross. And that's it. So how great was Heracross actually? Well, from generation 2 to 8, every single one has been a success for our Megahorn spamming friend. It actually started out as a defensive pillar in its debut generation, but in every generation after that, it's been one of the purest offensive terrors around and has shredded pretty much every metagame it's landed in, shining in OU many a time, occasionally even Ubers, and even being banned from several iterations of UU and RU. And in VGC, it may not be the greatest thing, but it still hits really hard, and it still got impressive placements from its dedicated users. So all in all, Heracross has had an outstanding competitive history and is an elite singles Pokemon. Thanks for watching, everyone, and as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. And in the comments, I want to know, what do you think about competitive Heracross? What would you give it to make it be true OU status? What would you give it to make it do something in VGC? Whatever it is, let me know in the comments. And thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos, and thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.